We'd like to welcome you to the virtual kitchen table. We are Haley from Taking a Kinder Path, Ashley from Ashley as Mama and Storytime Shelves, and myself, Erin, from Everlearning. We're gathering to have conversations about family life and home education, most specifically unschooling, which is sometimes known as self-directed education, or as I often refer to it, whole life learning. We'll be sharing experiences and ideas, learning as we go. We hope you'll pull a chair up to the table and join us. Welcome back to the virtual kitchen table. It is Erin here today and Ashley. Hey, Ashley.
Hi, Erin.
How are things with you today?
Oh, good, thanks. Excited to be back recording.
Yeah, I know. I'm thinking we're recording this like late August, so I'm assuming we'll probably have this one up for September. So it's been kind of nice to have a little break, but it will be
Yeah.
nice back into the swing of things. Um, and okay, so today we're talking about nature study. And I don't know, I mean, when I think about outside, I'm pretty happy that it's breezier and cooler finally today. So, or maybe
Yes.
yesterday, but yeah, I feel like the timing was good because I think originally I had come across Haley's post, and it's a resource post about nature study. And so I thought, well, this would be kind of a cool one to do. We've done a couple of other sort of like subject related episodes. We've done I think one science one and
Hmm.
maybe two math. So
Yeah.
we've kind of, and I think we're planning to do more of that, kind of look at what are some typical school subjects and just kind of talk about different ways they can look. So nature studies seems like it's not like a classic school subject, but it is kind of something that a lot of people, when they begin homeschooling, a lot of people hear about this, and it kind of becomes something that people often factor into their week. So from a homeschool perspective, it kind of is sort of a subject, right? But when I was looking at it, it's been so just like hot and humid and I don't know, to me unpleasant the last, I don't know, quite a long time, that it was kind of hard to get my head into feeling excited, about talking about being out in nature. But then today feels so nice. So I feel like it's inspiring. We've had a shift.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, as you know, we're not real far from you, so it's similar here. And yeah, I mean, really for July and August, or the first half of August, we've spent a lot more time inside. And this summer, I've been mostly okay with that.
Yep.
It's just been so hot, so humid. And I've really kind of shifted over the past, I don't know, couple years, and realizing that for our family, it works totally fine if we're outside more in the spring and the summer. We're not necessarily outside a lot these past couple years in the winter either, when it's really cold, though that might shift as we get into different, potentially get into different winter activities or not. But yeah, this past, let's say month and a half, lots of time inside. But I think we'll probably talk today a little bit about how you can kind of bring nature inside and still, explore nature when you're inside as well.
Yeah. No, I'd love to talk about that as well. I think there are like just a lot of different ways that you can think about it, right? So I don't know, should we get started maybe just talking a little bit about kind of how we each interact with the outdoors, or whether we like it or not, or what things we like about it. Do you have
Yeah.
anything that pops into mind around that, or do you want me to get started? It doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just share briefly, and then I'll let you get into to sharing your experiences. But when I was thinking about today, I was kind of thinking about what nature studies looked like for us in the younger years when we started homeschooling, or even just when the kids were really little, kind of versus to like the middle years where we are now, with mine being 9 and almost 12. But then I also was really curious and thinking about more of the teen years and what nature study can look like at that time. And I know we'll mention your blog post as well, where you share about that. And I'm looking forward to hearing about it. But yeah, if you want to get started with sharing your experiences, that'd be great.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah. And just you're mentioning that blog post. Yeah, so we will
Hmm.
having a look here. We will link that at the bottom. It's homeschooling philosophies and supporting interests, nature journaling the unschooling way. And then Haley's is Haley's called Getting Started with Nature Study?
The
It's
one I have, I think home ed resources, nature study.
yes, sorry.
Okay.
Right. Yes. I'm looking at like a subheading rather than a yeah, and hers her post has like an incredible like just a huge number of resources.
Yeah.
So I think that'll be really good to link as well. So yeah, so just to kind of begin that way, we will link those two posts just for some food for thought. Well, in Haley's case, some really good resources. But yeah, so I don't know, like when I think about the outdoors, like I think when my kids were younger, like I'm going to say like early, very early school years, for example, we connected with a homeschool group that was pretty, I wouldn't say like it wasn't like this, the sole focus was being outside, but we just seemed to find ourselves outside a lot. Um, and I think even when activities weren't outside, we would hang out afterward, right? So if we had a field trip planned somewhere, it might be an indoor field trip, but then the kids would want to play. But like, let's say you're touring the fire station, just as an example, you can't just keep hanging out there, right? So once you do the tour, usually, like our group was pretty open ended. So there were usually, um, like not all the families, but there were definitely several who would be kind of game for like going to a park or going to a field or something, and then just kind of continuing the play from there. So it feels like we were outside a lot in like an unintended is quite the right word, but yeah, it wasn't like let's go do nature study, but it was just like we would find ourselves at parks, at conservation areas, just in fields, wherever, parking lots at times. So they were still kind of really getting that outside time and that physical activity. And I think what I really like about that now that I'm just thinking about that right now, actually. It was very unstructured. So we would have like whatever we were meeting for initially might have some structure to it if we were being toured through as like just the fire station as an example. Um, but then that chance to like play and socialize was just like their own movement, their own. And so that's kind of an interesting thing too around like nature study versus outdoor time. And, nature study obviously sounds quite focused. And like maybe, I don't know, maybe we can think a little bit about the distinction between those two things. But you could be a person who doesn't necessarily love being outdoors that much, but really like studying nature. And then you could also be a kid who wants to play like pick up soccer for 2 hours or whatever after a field trip. And you're maybe not studying nature, but you're still getting some of the benefits, I guess, of being outside, of that movement, of the sunshine, of the fresh air. So it's interesting. It's interesting how like I don't know. Sometimes we have these sort of subjects or these topics like nature study, um, but it can mean so many different things. And then I also think about the fact that sometimes just by being immersed outside, like I'll just give that example again of a bunch of kids in a soccer game or playing hide and seek or something like that. They're not studying nature, but just by being out for periods of time, you are naturally noticing changes in where the sun is in the sky, changes in the clouds, changes in the air pressure, the feeling of like wondering if it's going to rain, because you can feel that difference in the air, you know, kind of just subconsciously hearing grasshoppers in the background, like all those different things that you're still being exposed to nature, but maybe it's not like, let's go study this today. So anyway, that's one piece. And we did actually do some things where we were studying as well, but I will stop there for a minute and maybe come back to the other because yeah, I'd love to know if you have any thoughts on that. Just that like being outside versus, studying something very intentionally.
Yeah, no, I really like starting here, Erin, because I was thinking about that quite a bit. And actually, the word exploration kept coming up for me because, I mean, I know of nature study because in the homeschool world, that kind of creeps up, right? You can find the blog posts, you can find, I'm sure there's books, and whatnot all about nature study. And same as you, like we have done a bit, but for the most part, it's just been being outside or talking about nature, whether it's weather or animals or animal habitats or whatever. Um, and I think it's helpful, because, and I mean, we talk about this a lot on the podcast, like every family's different, every kid's different, every parent's different. So you kind of find what works. And I'm sure for some families, having a more focused nature study is really helpful. That's not been our experience. Like for them, even the times where I might pull a resource from an actual little nature study topic or theme, I use a few pieces and then we just see where it goes and where it leads. And I often find too with the different topics, like you could choose to study weather, for example, and you could dive really deep, especially, if one of your kids are really interested in. I know we had a nature or a book on weather that my one kid in particular, spent a lot of time going back to and looking through. So you could expand on that and really go deep. But I find with all of the nature topics, like we come back to so many of them. Like it's not like you've focused on weather. I mean, you could focus on weather and check it off and say, okay, we've done weather, but because you're outside and like you said, you're experiencing it all the time, in different ways, you keep coming back to it, which I think is kind of nice because then I feel like we're not going to miss anything. I mean, there's so much. You would never cover all of it anyway, but I think just being outside and like you said, different opportunities come up. And there's been times where like I remember when the kids were younger, this probably happened a couple different times where we would go out and we would look for tadpoles, because that's so fun, right? And then we probably got like a book from the library and we did the life cycle and we got into it all a little bit more. But I never felt pressure, I guess, to like go further than they were interested in because eventually they'd be interested in something else,
Mhm.
usually often nature related, right? Um, but yeah, and then the last thing I'll just say about all of that is when I was thinking about talking about this today, it was kind of funny because I was like, ooh, like nature study. And I'm like, we've done so much, but what does that really look like for us? Because it's not like a neat little package.
Yeah.
It's been all scattered throughout all of our experiences and it's looked different. Sometimes it is a little bit more focused, maybe like when we're going out, like we have a hiking group that we've gone out with at various points. And other times it's more so just like what you said, being outside, socializing and playing. And the focus is maybe off of nature a bit more, but we're experiencing it still. So it's been really fun for me to just take some notes for today because I mean, my list got long quick of like all the different things that I've been strewing for nature over the years. Think about like all the nature collections. Like once I started writing down what our nature study looked like, that's maybe what we spent the most amount of time on. And then you can really easily start seeing how um, like art, math, science, all the different reading, writing, it all just ties in so great, right? So
Well, and that's the thing, isn't it, with something like nature study, is that you do start to realize that there are so many. It's like something like music that way. I think when you look at it, all those kind of core subjects are tied. I mean, obviously things like science, especially with nature, but I mean, you think about art, you think about all the poetry that's written about. There are just so many other subjects that tie in exactly. Um, yeah, and I was thinking, just like as you're talking there, Ashley, about just like the different ways of sort of experiencing it and how that happens naturally. And I was wondering too, like, we tend to think in such linear ways about learning. So, for example, if I was to purchase like a nature study curriculum, I'm actually thinking my daughter, there was a period of time where we did buy a bunch of stuff. I'm wondering if we actually did have one. But it's like you're systematically covering the topics. Do you know what I mean? Like you're looking at this topic, you're doing some work on it, you're maybe doing a fun activity around it. Um, and then it's like, okay, you've studied this, and then you kind of move on to the next thing. And I was thinking about how much learning is connected to like, I mean, obviously we talk about this a lot, like how relevant something is in our lives, but just the I'm not even quite sure what I'm saying. I'm thinking about now as like a middle-aged person, how many things I'm learning that are tied back to like early childhood memories. So just things like I remember when I think about camping as a little kid, like if I hear a blue jay call, that always takes me back to like mornings camping, right? Or if I'm, just even out somewhere now, the buzz of certain insects at a certain time of year, or like spider webs looking a certain way, certain wildflowers. And I just, like I grew up, I saw them, I didn't think a lot about them, but there's like an emotional attachment to that stuff. So it's like, you see it and it sparks like a knowing that you've had, that you've seen so many times over so many years. And I wonder if for us living a kind of a climate where we have such distinct seasons, right? I think I'd be interested in if it's different for people depending on where they live as well. But for us, we have such distinct seasons. And so there are these things that come up, and like I find sometimes it's just been more the last 5 or 6 years that I've started looking that stuff up. It's not even around teaching my kids, it's myself. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And I'll look back and I'll think, I wonder if that wildflower, always like happens to be around a pond or around or whatever. Because I have these memories, but I've never looked up the facts. And not that you have to look up the facts. There's lots of stuff that I don't bother looking up the facts for, but there's just been lots of stuff that came up for me, like more in my 40s, where I was like, oh, I've been seeing this my whole life. I wonder what that's about.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's kind of like, or just learning some of the reasons that blue jays call like the way that they do. But it was just a sound I heard as a kid. So there's just something about being exposed to things just in like really natural ways and not always worrying about the facts or drawing a diagram. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
like, yeah,
Yeah, the drawing the diagram thing.
yeah,
I think when sometimes when you start thinking about nature study, you think about like the nature journaling, the diagrams, right? And I've definitely printed off a fair share of different things but mostly just end up putting it up for the kids to see if they're interested in. Um, but I like what you're talking about because I've have a similar experience with the older I get, and maybe it is the slowing down with the kids and exploring with them that has allowed me to um, just focus a bit more on nature and be out in nature a bit more with like with young people who are just naturally curious about these things and they ask the questions. And I mean, I definitely find nature really interesting, but like you as a kid, I loved being outside and I spent a lot of time outside and like you said, experiencing the different seasons, but I wasn't curious about the things I'm curious about now, I guess. And I was probably just interested in playing and just, other things, right? And I it's a good reminder for me when I see the kids outside because they're the same. Like they want to be with their friends on the hike, they want to be exploring. And yes, they'll pause and get curious about something, but then they're very quickly off to something else. So I think that's probably common. I mean, some kids will be more interested and curious, of course, and ask different questions and like to go further about things. But I think that's pretty typical in childhood. And then yeah, having the opportunity to slow down, like kind of as a homeschool parent and learn those things with the kids. I have a lot of other homeschool friends who, um, I can tell they're very, very interested in nature. And it would be easy to look at them and assume they've just always been interested in nature. But I don't think that's necessarily always the case. And I think that that's one other thing that maybe that's why like nature study or nature exploration is so I don't know, popular or common in the homeschool world is because we can all, no, I shouldn't say that, but most of us can get outside often enough and explore whether it's the neighborhood, the backyard, a creek, a park, wherever you are outside. You can go explore it together. You can go a lot of places. It's free. There's just so many things that you can be curious about together. And it's interesting enough usually for both like the kids and the parents. So yeah, I'll stop there because I don't want to venture off too far from
Yeah.
what you were sharing, but
No.
I do like thinking about like the kids' experiences with it, but also our own as well and how that all fits together in a pretty neat way.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, yeah, it does. And I think when we think about it this way, it kind of takes the pressure off this idea that um, that we need to cram all this information into our kids' heads because, I mean, we're both saying that a lot of the stuff we didn't even start sort of thinking about or piecing facts together about until on into our adult years. So obviously we survived
Yeah.
without knowing all the little details and all the little pieces. I'd be interested too, Ashley, like, would it be different for us had we been home educated? Like, because I have always had an interest in nature, but I just don't think in school. I mean, we talked about it if it was part of like, if it was part of a science assignment or topic that we were studying, but there wasn't like I just picture, you're talking about you're out on a walk with your kids, or I mean, we talk about walking so much, even on a drive, right? We're seeing,
Mhm.
we're noticing things. Um, or you could be watching a show or reading a book or something, and there's nature stuff coming up. And it just seems to make so much sense for them to ask in that moment. And so I do think that my kids, they know way more about nature than I would have at their age. I mean, I was immersed in nature a lot, but as far as like facts and being able to identify things, um, we really kind of learned those things at the same time. I mean, I learned a lot, honestly, a lot about nature and science in general, um, from children's TV. Like
Mhm.
just all the little, and I mean young, like
Yeah, like Wildcrats.
yeah, yeah,
Same.
yeah. So I mean, I learned tons from that, and so we were kind of. Sometimes it was things I'd kind of heard about, but it obviously wasn't very solid in my mind about different pieces of nature. So it was kind of like, yeah, we kind of learned together, which is why I know they know a lot more at their age than I did, because I kind of learned with them. Um, so I do think in like a homeschool environment, there's so much more opportunity for kids to ask those questions in the moment. And as you said, more times just be out kind of doing some of those things to begin with. There's just more opportunity. Um, but yeah, I'm curious like what that would have looked like if my days had been filled more with being able to be curious about things, right? I think my parents, like when I was just with family, they were good about answering questions. But it's just not quite the same as having kind of those open-ended days.
Yeah, no, I think that's actually a really good point. And maybe even just our like different views or perspectives of learning and education, and how that would make us feel, because we were used to a school experience. Yeah, rather than just being out with open-ended days and kind of letting the curiosity lead. And the other thing I'm thinking about just now, um, I mean, my dad was an outside person, so he would often be, you could find him outside, but I remember spending a lot of time alone outside. I mean, I have two younger sisters, so they would have been around a lot too, but and I remember enjoying it. Like, I remember being outside and really getting into like imaginary play on my own outside when I was really young. Um, but I often think, and my kids do that too, but I'm just thinking about maybe how my kids might spend more time with older kids and growing ups outside exploring together.
Mm.
Like my parents, we didn't camp growing up. Um, that's obviously a nice family activity to like do outside, but we didn't camp. And I think I would have spent more time with my dad outside in the winter, because we did do dog sledding and like snowmobiling and stuff. So there probably, if I spent more time thinking about it, there was probably times where I was outside with the growing up. But I think that's a nice connection point for kids. Again, not like there's absolutely value to spend out to spend time by yourself outside, but also to have someone else there just for when those questions do come up, right? Because I'm sure there's times when I was outside by myself where I would notice different things, but if there wasn't anybody around to talk about it with, like just a natural, organic conversation that just kind of comes up. Because that's what I have found, that when I am outside with the kids, especially if we're, yeah, like on a walk or like you said, on a drive, like the questions just come up. And there's some years where they're endless, right? And those questions are just the beginning of, like, often you get home and you start doing all the research and digging into it. So it just got me thinking a little bit about the differences between the access that children have to adults, like in the moment when they're experiencing those things in nature.
Hmm. Well, and a couple things there, like you're talking about the dog sledding and the snowmobiling, and those to me are like those perfect examples of what I was talking about, where you're not out to study nature, but just by being out there, there's so many things that you take in on just like a sensory level. So I'm thinking like, well, both of those things, snowmobiling and dog sledding. So you're moving through cold air, and you learn so much about yourself, right? About your body and that temperature, about motion in that temperature, how the weather differs from like one day to another, like a snowy day versus just a super cold day versus an icier day. And I got thinking about like waiting for the school bus because we lived in a rural area, and how I would, like at a pretty young age, I would know the temperature that my fingers, like I would, when I got old enough to kind of be looking at the thermometer, for example, right? So I would know which day I was going to like lose feeling in my fingertips, or I would know which material of mittens that was more likely or less likely to happen in. Or you start to think about like tobogganing, for example, and just the physics involved in that, and friction, different types of snow, different types of ice. Um, and it's like a knowing rather than something that I mean, I guess if I had been tested on it or if I'd had to write about it, I could have, but it just isn't necessary. It's just, you just know those things for you just know those things for practical reasons. And you
Yeah,
kind of do them. Like, how to situate your scarf, or do you know what I mean? Like, you don't need to write about that, but on some level that is nature, that is, it's weather related, and it's science related, but yeah, you're just living it kind of. But I think those are the kinds of things that afterward, like years later, sometimes there's moments where I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting, this material versus that material. And that might be something I would look into, especially if I'm then the parent and I'm wanting to figure that out for my own child, right? Like, oh, which mitts are going to work better, whatever, and why. Um, yeah, but it's just something that you're just immersed in. You're just doing it.
yeah, it's making me come back to thinking about, and these are just the two words that are coming to mind for me right now, is that exploration versus the study. But like what you're saying, like what's the reason behind it?
Mm-hmm.
And you learn so much in the moment when, especially, yeah, if it's something practical, right? And it's really useful, and that there's room for errors where, you put on the wrong mittens and your fingers are really cold out at the bus stop. I had the exact same experience. Or when to, I'm even thinking footwear, like when to change footwear because it might not be snowing anymore, but it actually is still quite cold. So you still want your boots. And you make mistakes along the way and you learn. So it's just really thinking about, like, that just keeps coming up for me, is like the exploration, like just exploring it as it comes up day to day versus intentionally studying it. And there's value in both, but I think with nature there's just so much of it that does just come up, which is great. I think you mentioned this near the beginning, is that it takes some pressure off of us, right? As parents, we know that if the kids are getting outside, and if we're all getting outside, or again, if we're learning about nature in various ways from inside, we're all getting so much out of it, and we're all going to get different things out of it, and be interested in different things that depending on what's going on for us. So I
Yeah,
like that aspect of it a lot too, just knowing it's like it's happening. the
yeah,
the
yeah.
learning and growing is happening, which is always just comforting because sometimes we can be bogged down with all the pressure and the worries. So
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think too about like what do we notice that's almost more artistic than it is scientific? And does it matter? And I'm not sure that everybody does do nature study for the purpose of science. I think some people do it just as a way of kind of just putting focus into something, or maybe enjoying like the aesthetics of something. So I'm just thinking, I know we're talking a lot about winter, which is weird because we're in summer right now.
yeah.
But like I'm thinking even like times like the way the sun will hit icicles or things like that. And it's like being fascinated by it. And sometimes you do find yourself curious about the kind of the science of it, right? Like you're looking at the angle of the sun, blah, blah, blah. But other times it's just this moment of beauty. And so I think there's like there can be an artistic piece to nature study as well. And I think I've talked about this a little bit before, that when my daughter kind of, I would say on into her teenage years, um, she had always really liked like plants and animals and things like that, but I wouldn't have considered her like a real outside person. Like she was fine to go outside, but it wasn't um I wouldn't say it was something she craved at all. But she has always been interested in animals and plant life and things like that. And so she took on stuff that was, I think people would have more associated with science, as far as well, she's done some work with endangered species. She joined another group where they did a lot of work with like plant life and pollinator gardens and different things like that. It was like more of a conservation focus. But it really wasn't, I think for her, it really wasn't. I mean, you could have looked at those things and they were quite sciencey. I mean, she was working alongside a biologist, right, for a couple of those. That seems pretty sciencey. And it is. I mean, she learned a lot of science, but it wasn't really about that. I think it was more about, part of it was about kind of the, I guess, conservation end of things, I think. But part of it, I think, was like artistic, like just really, really kind of studying the different structures of the birds and the plants and the flowers. So I don't think it has to be like, I think there's so many different reasons that people can become interested in nature and in wildlife. Um, and I'm not sure, sometimes I wonder if the whole idea of like nature study and like nature journaling, which I think flowed out of like a Charlotte Mason philosophy, um, it, I imagine it being kind of a way to actually draw back from the dryness of just these subjects. Like I think the intention behind it is very beautiful. It's like, let's move back outside of just like dry subjects and really enjoy the world around us. But I think sometimes people end up feeling pressure to make it really schoolish. But I'm not sure that was the intention originally, if that makes sense. I think it was more that idea of being present and taking note of things and having an opportunity to get some fresh air and be out and do things, rather than just, in the classroom kind of slogging through standard subjects, so to speak. But somewhere along the line, I think like with so many things, and maybe with home education, people are already feeling a little bit or a lot nervous, feeling like they are not enough. I think things get turned into an entity in and of themselves. I don't know. I'm just, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's, I mean, we're on the same page with it. And I think lots of times, I want to be careful how I say this because again, I recognize everybody's different and everyone's, making choices that they think is, the right choice for their families. But I think lots of times what can happen, I'm not saying that it's wrong to go this route at all, but I think with nature study, we can, like I'm thinking about parents who went through school themselves. We take nature study and to make ourselves feel better, to make ourselves feel like more comfortable in what our kids are spending time doing, is we turn it into something that just isn't necessary. I think that's fine sometimes, because, especially if your kids are enjoying it still and having fun, and then the parents feeling more confident and better with what everybody's doing, then that works. But I just think, like what you said, the idea with nature study is it is okay to just go out and be in it and get whatever it is you do get from it, because there really is so much. I mean, even if you just look at one thing like animals in the forest, there's so many different ways that people can experience that. Like some people will be interested in learning about the animal habitat. Some people will want to learn about, different predator animals versus prey. There's some people will want to sketch it. Like there's so many different things. So I always think it's more limiting, I guess, to turn it into something more structured, where we go in with this idea, okay, we're going to go do this and we're going to spend 15 minutes on our nature journal, and everybody's going to sketch what they see, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to talk about the new terms that we've learned. I don't want to say any of this is wrong, but I just think it limits us because we can't. I mean, we know our kids, so we have an idea of what might interest them, but we don't know what's going to catch their interest in the moment when we go out. So I think it's just helpful to just leave it open, and 100% okay to make suggestions, offer materials, model what interests you. Maybe you want a nature journal or a scavenger hunt. I know that's another really popular one. So I don't want to say like there's any, like in my opinion, there's no like wrong ideas or plans. But for me, I've just found that, like if you're, anytime I have felt the pull, because I used to be a teacher, so I know I come with that mindset, right? Like I went to school myself and then I became a teacher. So it was very easy for me in the early years to think like, okay, we're going to go outside and we're going to focus on this and we're going to learn about this and I'm going to prepare the scavenger hunt and, all the preparations for all the things. And of course, my kids were interested in some of it, but it felt like a whole lot of effort. And would sometimes lead to my own disappointment because I thought, well, we didn't get through everything I thought we were going to get through, but it didn't matter. It really didn't matter. And I think it does, at times it would have limited the kids on, I'm trying to shift their focus onto whatever it is that I think we're going to study that day or learn about that day, when something else has caught their interest that is just as valuable. And of course, now we know, like, we want them to dive into what interests them because that's what's going to stick with them. So I went off there rambling, but I think that connects back to what you were saying. And I think it is just easy for that to happen sometimes, because if we grew up learning that way, and like that's what learning looked like, and there's so many beautiful nature study curriculums out there, that I think, yes, our kids can appreciate the beauty of those too, but I'll just speak for myself. I know I was printing them off because I liked the looks of them and I thought they were beautiful. And same, I brought out the watercolor sets because that was an interest of mine. So, I mean, thankfully, I didn't push the kids real hard or anything. So I don't, I'm not beating myself up, but there were definitely times where I was like, this is what this looks like. This is what we do. But if I was being honest, like that was for my own comfort. So that there was like a finished product, right? Like that is the evidence of the learning, right? Like the beautiful nature journal the kids created. My kids never completed a nature journal. That's just such a classic example with nature study. Or the printables that you could print out. And I think you can use that stuff and the kids can still get something out of it. What I'm real from my own experience, what I learned is to just be very open and willing to letting go.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
right? Like materials that you're strewing, project ideas that you're strewing, different things that you're getting into and modeling for your kids, just be open. And that has worked out a lot better. And I think it just makes a lot more sense when it comes to all the things, but especially nature, because it really doesn't matter what they're interested in. And it's all fascinating. So
Mhm. Mhm.
yeah, I'll stop rambling, but
Yeah, no, I think that was all really relevant because I think like here's the thing, there's so many there are just so, especially when we look at something like nature, there are so many things that you could learn. It's endless, absolutely endless. And you have people who kind of want to learn a lot of things about, like, kind of like a surface amount about a whole bunch of things. That's probably me.
Hmm.
I kind of like to generally have an idea of what's around me, but there's a point that is fine for me. Do you know what I mean? Like I want to know some basic stuff and then I'm good. And
Hmm.
then you have people who really want to deep dive into one area, but they're maybe not that interested in plants, but they really want to understand what's going on with these animals or whatever. Um, and so I think when you move away from being attached to uh, not just curriculum, but like resources, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But when you move back from that, it really shows you how much there is. Like when you start listening to your kids, because it's stuff that you might not have ever been interested in, or you might not have noticed. And so if your kids are bringing that up, it's like, oh, I never would have thought about that, or I never would have been interested in that. And you start to realize how much there is beyond what any curriculum developer could come up with. Um, but yeah, I just wanted to comment on the idea of like different curriculum and resources because they are beautiful, especially nature study ones.
Yeah.
Especially nature study. They are beautiful. And a lot of the kind of like the nature journals, they just having that space where, you can create your own or you can do whatever. And what I have found with those, because we do have a lot of those, we have like a night sky one, we have quite a few. Um, the idea of having them is almost more exciting than their function.
Yeah.
I have found, like, and even for the kid, like they look exciting to the kids as well. It's like, oh my goodness, this is beautiful. We're going to track the whatever every day, and the enthusiasm sometimes is there for the kids as well. I mean, definitely, it's usually
Yeah.
there for us because they're so beautiful. Um, but there's just something about we all learn and track things differently. And I know, like we talked about this on the episode we did with Haley about lists. Like I just don't tend to make lists. So not in writing. So I can look at these journals and think, oh, I would, you know, I'll keep track of this or I'll do a little, but it just doesn't happen. And it doesn't mean that I've still seen that same number of birds just because I haven't written them down, right? For some people, it would be important to write them down. And for me, it just doesn't seem to be. I just kind of, it's just an experience I had and I track it in my head. And can I write it down? I mean, sure. But there's nothing gained by that, really. And I think that's the piece there is like asking why is it important to do something in a particular way. Now I think that sometimes kids might be learning some really good skills through nature journaling that aren't even related to nature, right? So maybe they are kind of practicing their drawing or they're practicing their handwriting, or it's an opportunity to talk about how something is spelled. And so I think it's an interesting way to do something without it having to be like a spelling book or a
Mhm.
handwriting. Like it's an interesting way to kind of be doing a range of things. Um, but it just isn't for everybody, right? And I think at some point we had talked about having an episode just about curriculum
Mhm.
because there are some really beautiful ones out there, and to somehow find a way to be able to take advantage of and appreciate. Um, I mean, especially homeschool curriculum. I'm not going to say I feel this way about school curriculum, frankly. They're usually mass produced textbooks, but when you have people putting together like unit studies and different things, that usually comes from their heart. It's something they know a lot about, it's something they're interested in, and they want to share it. So I think if we can loosen our grip on how we use it, as you said, there's no harm in, having some word searches about metamorphosis.
Mhm.
There's
Mhm.
no harm in any of that. It's just like
Right.
what do we do? How attached are we to the outcome around how it's being used? Yeah.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah, pull whatever catches your interest, and that's what I like about strewing, I guess. It's really taught me to feel free to, leave out or present any resources that I think the kids might be interested in, or just ones that I'm interested in, and leave it out, but to really and it's almost been like a practice. Like the more I've done that, the more easy it is for me to let go. Like when I first was like, okay, strew something, like I got the kids they actually, I think they bought themselves a few years ago now, a good few years ago. They each have their own like microscope sets. So
Mm.
that's been one way we've brought nature exploration inside. Um, and I would put those out. So this would be a good few years ago. And, with some different items, or if they wanted to go out and get items and bring them in, look at them through the microscope. And they weren't used a lot. They have been since, um, but not as much as what I probably thought they would be when they first picked them out. And I remember feeling, even if I kept it to myself, a little bit disappointed, being like, oh, there's so many cool things you could look at or whatever, right? They only spent 5-10 minutes there. And the more I've strewed things, like I don't know if I have any attachment anymore to any of it that I put out. So it's been a bit of a practice with that. So I think, yeah, I think it's totally great to tap into those things. And of course, you're going to, find curriculum pieces that your kids are really interested in too. The other thing that this got me thinking a bit about was so not just thinking about curriculum, but thinking about, let me look at my notes. Oh, like, I guess like materials and tools for outside stuff. So, like, actually just yesterday, because the weather cooled down after the rain, we have these, I don't know the measurements, but they're not huge but pretty decent sized tarps. I have two of them, and they've actually used them inside more than outside, so they're still clean, or relatively clean, but for fort building and for making like little shelters and tents and stuff. So yesterday afternoon, my 9-year old was outside, and I forget how it got brought up, but anyway, we ended up going. He asked for a couple of things, and then I was like, oh, do you want the tarps, because we hadn't had those out in a while. So it's kind of just like loose material, right? Like I threw out two tarps. He grabbed like a fold up camping chair, and it was all about setting up whatever it was they were doing in their imaginary game. um, but like I bring those to the forest school so that the kids, and it's typically not, well, it's usually like, I want to say 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 year olds who take those tarps and start, they're just big enough, right, to be able to like work together and start building the shelters and the forts. But other tools like, my kids haven't got into using knives yet, but I know at forest school, a good few of the friends there, once they got to a certain age, that was kind of like a tool that they were taught how to safely use, or learning how to start and tend to a fire. But other tools like a compass. I mean, I see a lot of younger ones with that, walking around with a compass. A telescope was another one that we got when my oldest was a bit younger. But like not really little. So just thinking about like the different materials and tools and things that like are, I guess, are more hands-on um, for the kids. Or I was even thinking about like April, who's in our community, and we've had on here, April's son with his fishing, right? So like outside animals, nature, the pond, the water, but an activity, like a focused activity that he loves. Or the other one we've done is geocaching. So going outside, which the geocaching itself isn't nature, but you're definitely doing it out in nature, and you're going through the trails and, looking at, lots of times the ones we found have been like in or near trees or different things like that. So I think like, yeah, like I was just thinking about different ways we've kind of, especially as the kids have gotten older, kind of like thinking about the younger years going out. um, Nature collections were a big one. So I didn't talk about that earlier, but it's shifted a bit where the kids, I find, like strewing those types of materials. And if they, if I throw out the tarps and no fort is made, that's fine, right?
Yeah.
Or if you hand over the compass and the kid doesn't look at it, that's fine. Or even just, I'm just thinking of ideas now, like bringing, often we'll bring bird seed when we go on a hike to leave out and see what birds might come around. So I just wanted to kind of spend a little bit of time thinking about, on top of curriculum, on top of nature journaling, thinking a little bit more about what my kids have been interested in as the older that they get, to help them, um, I guess, stay interested and just enjoy themselves outside. Like they needed a little bit more of a purpose, I guess, if that
Mhm.
makes sense.
No, it makes total sense. And I think the idea of like you were talking about the bird seed or the compass, I think having a little bit of something with you, like I'm thinking like something as simple as a magnifying glass,
Yeah.
right? Just carrying a magnifying glass, or like, yeah, the bird seed idea, or I think, can't remember which of my guys, they had like the it's like the 5-in-1, like with the knife and I
Yeah.
can't, the name is escaping me right now. And it's
Yeah.
not even necessarily that they were using it for all that much. It's just the idea of being out there with one. I think when they were younger, like just having this, and I think about how I find a very common one is to find a stick and walk, you know, do the hike with your stick or whatever. There's just something about like having something to accompany the walk, and it's not even always clear exactly what the purpose is, but it's just like um or like we've had fun sometimes too, like you'll see a sign. I can remember walking, we were, it was like this trail close to a creek, and there was a sign. It was just like a Saturday afternoon, and it was giving the history of how loggers used to use that it's a creek or a river. It's kind of like either a really big creek or a very small river. But the idea is they would float logs down to the lake, and then they would be shipped off, right? So it gave this history, and like my three guys, oh my goodness, they spent, that became their whole thing. Gathering
Yeah.
sticks, going to the bridge, putting the sticks over, running along the path to watch it flow down the creek. I mean, we didn't go all, we couldn't get to the lake from where we were, but it was just like that idea, right? And
Yeah.
and so just kind of combining their efforts to do that kind of thing, I don't know, that's the kind of thing that I feel like that builds those memories, and it has a purpose. It's a pretend play purpose,
Yeah.
but it is a purpose. And it kind of makes me think like, have we created, so this idea of nature study, like where else in life, unless you are a biologist or maybe a wildlife artist or photographer, where you're really needing to study something or stay, know the conditions and stay somewhere for a long period of time. Like that just isn't typically how people use the outdoors, right? People play sports outside, people go for hikes, people just go to clear their mind. Um, People might go to listen for birds, but the average person is not carrying a notebook with them.
Yeah.
Like, not really. That's not really how we interact with nature. So, when you were talking about how when you were a kid and you would be outside, and a lot of it was like maybe imagination or imaginary play, like that was so much me as well. Just going into the backyard to write stories in my head. And I wanted to be outside, but I wasn't going outside just to be outside.
Mhm.
Right. So I think there's definitely value to the idea of nature study. I'm just not sure it's all that, it's not really what we do
Mhm.
unless it's our job. Like, unless it's our
Mhm.
job, or unless we, and as I said, unless we really have a passion to go and sketch those plants or whatever. That's not how the average person spends their time outside.
Yeah, which is helpful to think about, because then if your kid's not interested in
Yeah.
whatever it is, it's like, well, that's okay. That's actually pretty common.
Yeah.
And I think by having those experience outside, like what you've talked about, because we do know there is so much, like I'm thinking like health benefits and mental health benefits to being outside, that's kind of more so um, what I focus on, I guess, with my kids is I just want them comfortable out, not comfortable, they are naturally comfortable outside. I mean, unless it's like really hot or something, right? Like we do like outside. I think it's almost like helping them not forget the older they get that they do enjoy it outside. Like I'm thinking back to when it kind of shifted where the kids started to get a bit older and it wasn't so easy to convince them to go outside. And so we were inside more and more. But I was like, well, I think you're still going to really have a good time once we get outside. And it was the whole like navigating that and thinking about the different tools I previously mentioned, different materials helped with that so that they could feel excited and make that transition outside. But it was just because um yeah, like being outside feels good to us, right? And we enjoy it. So it's not so much that chances are my kids won't have a career that revolves around being outside. I mean, it's great when we have, like you said, like a real passion or like a hobby, like a sport, like bike riding outside. Or, I mean, we're by the water, so there's a lot of people who in recent years, got into paddle boarding. So I think you're maybe more likely to do that. I mean, your kids, well, all of us are really motivated by kind of what our other family members do and our peers do. So that could just hook you too, even if you weren't outside much as a younger person. But yeah, like I think it's kind of like just being outside is enough. And whatever you get from that at whatever age is good.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think okay, I just want to talk about the old, as kids get older thing for a minute,
Yeah.
Ashley, and then if you can remember to,
Yeah.
and I just because I want to also, a thought popped up about the difference between being outside and learning about outside because they're
Okay.
not always the same thing. So,
Yeah.
in my experience at least. But anyway, just as far as kids get older, because I think that's a really good point that when kids are little, thank you. I see you putting a note down. So good at that. Um, when kids are little, they're just like, those examples I was giving of we would be on a field trip and then they would just go play. And there doesn't have to be like, I don't know, they're just so uninhibited, right? So they're just out there and they're playing and it's just kind of the way that they are. And I think you're right. As they get a bit older and maybe more into like the adolescent years and whatnot, they are maybe a little bit more self-conscious. They're maybe not just going to run out and I mean, I'm not saying they won't use the trampoline anymore. I don't mean that. I still jump on a trampoline. Like I don't mean that you can't jump on a trampoline if you're not a little kid, but it's different. It's just they're a little more self-conscious. I think they are thinking a little bit more about like their identity, how they kind of want to spend their time. It just feels a little bit different. They don't have that same like, yeah, let's just run around like
Yeah.
kind of energy. And I'm thinking sometimes like just I think we underestimate even things like spending a few minutes, like let's say you're driving to get groceries, or you're just driving to an activity one of your kids are doing, or you're walking there, or whatever, however you get there. Um, just the process of getting from one place to another also gives us that, like honestly, just a minute or two getting in the car. Let's say you get out of the car to go into the store, come back. I mean, that's 4 different times that you're out for a burst of a few minutes. And I know that doesn't feel like a lot, but I don't know. I was just noticing how much of a sunburn I'd gotten while driving the other day. And I'm like, actually, this is outdoor time. Like I wasn't thinking
Yeah.
it was outdoor time, but I got home and I'm like, man, my arm is really red. And it is. You are outside, even in the winter, even with I mean, unless your car is super, super tinted, even in the winter, you are getting some benefit of sunlight. You're looking at things. You're noticing fresh air when you get into the car. The car is hot when you get into it in the summer. It's cold when your body is still having that stimulation of like different temperatures. And there's so many things to notice, right?
Mhm.
Even if that's just like that your town has new flower pots or like just whatever, there are still things to notice. So I wonder too if we overestimate what does it mean
Yeah.
to be outside or to engage with nature, right? Like, um, because I think it is probably going to be less at certain ages, or vice versa. Maybe if a kid gets really into a particular sport, they're actually going to be outside a lot, but that's not necessarily going to be nature study.
Yeah.
Like if they're going to rugby practice or something, like
Yeah.
that's probably not, it's just they're having that experience of being outside. So I think, yeah, just that openness about
Mhm.
it doesn't need to look this one particular way. Um,
Yeah. I think this is really super helpful. And maybe it's just because I'm finding it really helpful at the stage we've been at for a little while, because I've really had, I think there's just a lot of pressure I have felt that I know other people have felt, to, around the amount of time your kids spend outside. Um, and even after I spent time reading about other people's experiences, or just really thinking about it, it's just kind of still in the back of your mind sometimes, like they're not outside enough, they're not outside enough. So I'm just very, I don't know, sensitive or aware to that pressure that I think a lot of us can feel, especially with, and I know we've talked a lot about screen use before, but I think there's often this, like, if they're inside and on, it's like inside on screens versus outside, even though they're not always on screens when they're inside. There's just been a lot of talk about that, for I don't know how long now, but definitely in more recent years. Um, and as the kids get older, like you said, it's so not always with all kids, because it depends on what they're into, and they might end up being outside more as they get older. But I don't think it's uncommon for, as they get older, there's some more resistance. Or I really like the way you talked about it, actually, like they're just feeling less comfortable and becoming more aware of like their identity and stuff. I don't want to put words in your mouth. That's not how you put it. But I liked how you explain, like, as the kids get older, they're not just running out and joining in a game of tag or hide and seek. And it's funny you mentioned the trampoline, because this is the first summer, and I will blame the heat, but my kids have hardly been on the trampoline at all. And that used to be the go-to, but they're almost 12 and 9. And actually, it's the 9-year-old who will get on it first, and it's the older one who's like not stepping foot on it.
yeah,
um, but I really, especially this summer, and one thing we haven't mentioned yet that really ties into this whole idea too is, I'm thinking like sensory differences with experiencing outside, right? So like the heat we've mentioned, wind can be one, sand at the beach, getting wet, like clothes are wet if it starts raining, you step in a puddle, you have wet shoes, bugs, sunscreen, bug spray. I'm just trying to think of like the different sensory things
yeah,
that can make being outside really challenging, right? And as kids get older, they become more self-aware of what works for them and what doesn't, which is great, um, and helpful for them. But they might say, no, I'm not going to go for that hike. And, let's go for the hike. No, 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 no. Now I know they're saying no because they know they're going to get hot, they're going to get sweaty. The bugs are really bad right now, and they're not going to have a good time. And I'm glad that they're learning that about themselves. But on the surface, I just have a kid I'm like, let's go for a hike, and they're like, no, and I'm like, ah, you know. So it's not
right.
bad. It's not bad that they're learning those things. Um, so my whole point in what I was saying was that, like what you were saying, thinking about outside time looks different as the kids get older for a lot of kids, where it's okay where, so for example, like the shorter amounts of time outside or in the car ride or like in between getting in and out of the car, instead of like going on a hike, instead of going for a day at the beach, it's still all outside time. It still all adds up. They're having lots of outside time and nature experience. One example with my oldest especially is, let's go get dinner and take it to have by the lake, or let's go run this quick errand that they're open to running, or go get ice cream, but I'll park, usually just because it's the closest parking spot, and there's a little walk involved, and we didn't plan to go for a walk, we planned to get ice cream, but the walk followed, and I'm noting that. There's probably other examples too, but anyway, I
Mhm.
think that that's really helpful to just be more open and flexible. The other example I had with that too is, as mine get older, and this might be true with younger kids too, but going outside I want to say less as a family and providing more opportunities to go outside with friends as they get older has been, I mean, that was maybe obvious for people. But also I've noticed going out instead of as a whole family, but one-on-one, like with one parent and one kid is nice for connection time. They get all the attention, and not only like all the attention, like, conversation and bonding time together, but also if they get too hot or if they get, uncomfortable and just done outside, it's much easier for me to be like, okay, instead of, if you've got multiple kids and one kid wants to stay and one kid wants to go, it's just a little bit easier to navigate with one kid. So sorry, I ended up
Uh,
throwing a lot at
no,
you there, but I
no,
just find it helpful.
that's all really, really good. And it makes me think like, so your child that, so you're suggesting a hike and somebody says they don't want to do that hike. And like, I think we have to be like, and like, why do we need to do the hike? So
Yeah.
because I am someone who loves to hike. So
Yeah.
I love to do that. I do like to be outside, but I don't like the hot sun in the middle of the day. So I'm a person that if, if there's a suggestion to go to the beach, I'm all about that first thing in the morning or like in the evening to watch the sunset. But the idea of like 4 or 5 hours midday at the beach is not enticing to me at all, right? And so we forget I think it's so helpful to look at our own like the way we process things and the other adults around us, because we can really get stuck in this idea of like, well, I'm offering my kid this opportunity and they keep saying no and they don't want to do this. But no human being really, I don't think, likes to do things without some sort of purpose to it. And I don't mean the purpose has to be productive. The purpose could be like a good sensory experience or a social opportunity. Like it doesn't have to be like to get something done, although it could be. But really, just randomly having somebody say to you, we're going to do this today. Let's do this in the hot sun with all the sand or the mosquitoes or the cold wind or whatever season it is or whatever. It's not, it's like us as parents feeling like we need to do something.
Yeah.
We need to fill the time. Our kids should be doing these activities,
Yeah.
but there's often not really a purpose to it. Or even if we kind of feel there is, it's not always obvious to the child, right? So I think it's like kind of what you said, there does seem to be this pressure about, yeah, kind of being outdoors and being, not just being outdoors, but like, and I feel this way, I have such mixed feelings about, I think it's so good that I guess maybe parenting, not just home education, it's, it's interesting to be able to kind of label things and find all these words. But well, I had written that blog post, I think, about how much more of that I've noticed. Like everything has a name now.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas what like my kids just used to go out and play. It's like, are your kids engaging in risky play? Are they,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? It's like all these words now. And the thing is that not every kid is going to engage in outdoor risky play. And we can still say that that has benefit, but it doesn't change the fact, like something can be beneficial. And also we don't have control whether our child does that or not. So, when I see a lot of things on social media and it's like, kids whipping through the sky on ropes and, like just all these things. And if that has benefit, if that's the brain that your child has, and if that's the way that they develop, if those are the types of risks that help your child develop that way, but that isn't going to be the path for every child. And I'm not even sure that we can say it's the best. People are so different from one another, right? So, I mean, I have one child in particular, there's no way they would ever be going through the sky on a rope.
Mm-hmm.
I have two that would. One,
Yeah.
nah, but I have one that absolutely, there's never been any moment in their life that there's been an urge to swing through the air on a rope and drop into cold water. Like that's just not happening.
Yeah.
And so, but they have found other ways to figure out what risks they want to take
Yeah.
and what they don't. And I think, for some kids that that maybe do have sensitivities or just learn in a particular way, the risk taking that can happen with gaming
Hmm.
or with board games or with something that they're challenging themselves to do with one of their interests is absolutely just as valuable. But I do feel like the pendulum has gotten kind of stuck right now in this um, like wild and free, wildlings. Everybody needs to be out, climbing rocks all day. Um, that just isn't what everybody wants to do, and I'm not actually sure, honestly, that's that necessary. I think it's fun. I see benefit to it,
Hmm.
but there's lots of ways of being. So I kind of just wanted to, I think what that brings me to as well. It's funny, like because we know there's so many pressures as parents and as home educating parents, but the idea of like nature study, it almost kind of like marries two different things that don't always go together. So the type of kid that maybe wants to spend a lot of time outside adventuring is not always the type of kid, and I'm generalizing, but
Hmm.
who wants to sit and do fine motor sketching and writing. Those are some
Yeah.
kids, right?
Yeah.
So you might have a kid that likes nature study. So you could get out a unit study and beautiful journaling pages and word searches and all the things, space for them to sketch. And they would love to very quietly sit at a table and get out the pencil crayons and do all that. That is not necessarily the same kid who's swimming in the pond all day.
Yeah.
Like it's almost probably often not.
I think you're right.
It's like two different things. It's like two,
Yeah.
and I think that you can. I really notice this with my husband, who is not really an outside person. He's outside, like if the lawn needs to be cut, like he'll do stuff, but he wouldn't. And he likes to golf, but
Hmm.
he would not go just for no purpose to do something. But he and I had begun to do some walking just for the purpose of like exercise, and it was interesting because he hasn't spent a lot, even in his childhood, he didn't spend much time outside. And other than, being on his bike back and forth to school or whatever, but not as far as like immersed in like nature. I was really fascinated at how many things he knew that I didn't know in this on the route that I walked all the time, right? He has an understanding of like the science behind things that I actually didn't know. So we were looking at like just different tones of color in the water, we were looking at the sky, and he'll point stuff out, or sometimes I'm interested in it and he'll just casually give me the answer. Like he's not even thinking about it. He's like, oh, yeah, that's because the surfers, blah, blah, blah. Oh, okay. Like I walk
Right.
by. So I enjoy being outside, but I don't necessarily, but he just has an innate understanding. And
Yeah.
he watches a ton of documentaries and he listens to stuff. He watches a lot of different things on TV that are nature related. And so he has actually done probably more nature study than I have, but I have spent way more time outside. So I just want to draw that distinction that knowing about nature is not this always the same thing as being in it. Like
Yeah. Oh,
it's
I love that you
interesting,
shared that.
right? Like,
That is a very cool example, and I think very helpful when parents are dealing with supporting
yeah,
multiple kids, right?
right. Yeah,
Because yeah, I know you think like, oh well, your husband loves nature, must spend lots of time outside being in and observing nature, but no, yeah, it learns it from inside, and it just you keep saying it, we're all so different, so it makes perfect sense. So it really shouldn't be surprising, but we do seem to have this idea that, yeah, nature, it's all outside and you have to enjoy being outside. But, and we've talked about it too, there's different ways to be outside too. Like your husband is outside at times, but it's to, get something done or whatnot. Yeah, that's a really cool example.
yeah. Well, and it's funny, one deviation, I guess, from that, which is just I still can't quite figure it out. The last 2 summers, he's just decided to have like his own flower garden.
Oh, right.
And it's still, I still can't, I kind of like smile every time I walk by it because it's
Yeah.
character. It's it's like it's so out of character, right? And it's just like somehow, he got into his 50s and decided I'm gonna play. I think this might be his third year actually. And it's just the weirdest thing. And I don't know why. Like I've tried to ask him a couple times. He's like, I don't know, I just wanted to see if I could, I just wanted to try it out.
Right.
And so it also just shows you that like we can't really be the forcers of things. We can model stuff, we can offer opportunities. And I think that that's a big piece probably of what we're saying, and certainly in Haley's post with all the resources. Um, because I know for Haley, like, they're very much about what different people are able to do and want to do in the moment. Like it wouldn't be like, but if you look at the number of resources that she's listed, it is definitely not that they don't have resources available. So I
Right.
think, well, and you're even listing the various pieces of equipment and stuff. So it's not about not having those opportunities,
Hmm.
not about not having the nature encyclopedias or the documentaries or the microscopes or whatever, but it's just, I think, about really enjoying how it unfolds rather than having, to me, it's like that conversation about like process rather than content. We can have the same content as anybody else. We can have picture books, the same picture books, as a more sort of kind of traditional homeschool or whatever. It's just the idea that it's like we're making things available, but we're having an eye to how they come up naturally, I think, rather than,
Hmm.
because I think people think, if I don't have all these things, what are we going to do? But the things, you
Yeah.
can still have them.
Yeah.
You're just not attaching yourself to that outcome
Yeah.
in the same way. Yeah.
I have thoughts, but I want to pause because I wrote down the note and I don't know if you got to it or not, but that you wanted to remember to talk about the difference between being outside.
And yeah, and I think we did, because
Okay.
I think that was that idea of like how this concept of nature study is almost two different kids in my
Yeah.
mind.
Okay.
That makes sense.
It made perfect
I
sense. I
think that's
wanted to
where,
double check.
yeah, that's where I was at, because I was
Okay.
thinking of a couple of my kids who really enjoy outdoor time, but they wouldn't be the one that would enjoy. So yes, I appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I wanted to make
That.
sure because that's when we
Yeah,
finish and then we go, oh, I meant to
yeah,
add that in. So I wanted
no,
to make
that
sure, but
was
I thought that's what it was. Um, I just wanted to kind of not move over because we've kind of talked about different things, but I just pulled up your blog post that you mentioned because I found it really helpful. And I think we kind of talked about some of this already, but I actually really like that this blog post is your experience and your daughter's experience about nature journaling. But specifically, I mean, we can talk about any of it that you want to point out or highlight too. But what I really liked that I think people would find helpful is I think it's more so towards the end of your post. You wrote down a few things that stand out about supporting your daughter in the process of her having this nature journaling that was her idea, that you kind of then did together, but in your own ways. So I really liked the whole post. But at the end, I think it kind of really goes along with some of the things that we were talking about today. And I guess it's kind of like, yeah, like your approach, and how you were, I think, like from the sounds of it anyway, intentional about how to um, hold the space for her with the nature journal experience. And I think it just made I can read some of it out too, but it really just made me think about the various different times my kids have kind of come up with their own idea or expressed an interest in something. And I've had to learn over time on how I will initially react to their idea. Um, and just the attachment I can get to their idea. Because one, it's super exciting when you're like, oh, follow your kid's lead, and they come to you with this idea, and you're like, oh, yay! You can, understandably get very excited. But now I've spent a lot of time, I think anyway, trying to understand how that feels from the kid's perspective, regardless of age, but even probably more so the older that they get. I think your daughter, like this was only a few years ago, right? So like a teenager.
yeah,
So
like four or five. She was probably 15, maybe. Yeah,
yeah. I
yeah,
feel like as you get
yeah,
older, like it's vulnerable, I think, right? You're being vulnerable when you're sharing something that's interesting to you and something you might want to explore because now you're putting it out there and rather than just kind of doing it on your own. And I think that's something I mean, that maybe that's like almost a whole topic on its own, or maybe too big of a topic. But I think, yeah, how we not just initially react, but how we, because I know like it's easy to like go get all the library books, go get all the resources, and then share all of our ideas or present, and it feels very helpful. It kind of feels like that's what you're supposed to be doing. And I think there are ways that you can do all of that, but it's really in relationship and knowing your child. And that's the sense I got when I read this, was that you already really knew, um, and you don't even need to know exactly how your kid is feeling, but just being really respectful and letting it continue to be their idea, but that they've invited you in. So you're kind of like, yeah, I'll be alongside you doing this. But it's just, I don't know what word to use. Like, I don't know if you feel like you're being like cautious, or if I might, I'll let you talk about it. But I really like the points at the end. You highlighted a few things that might be worth having us share a little bit or talk a bit about.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that I am actually, I do think this fits really well here. And I'm glad you brought it up, Ashley, because I think that it's like when you're right, when kids bring something up, and especially when it fits in what feels kind of easy for us, or like a checklist kind of for us,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, there, for your child to be like, hey, do you want to I've read about this thing called nature journal, it's like, oh.
Yeah.
It's funny that she got to this age. Like, I just found the whole thing funny. And she's like, yeah, I think you, just in case people don't read the post, she's like, there's this, I came across this thing called nature journaling. And there's this woman called Charlotte Mason. I think you'd really like her ideas. And I'm just laughing because, like, just to have your kid come to you at that age, and, um, but it was just so funny. And I think that so often what we do, well, there's two pieces. There's the thing where we feel excited about something, and then it's exactly what you said. It's like we get all the things, and we start writing the story about how they're going to become a who knows, right? Like, we can really start to roll with that. um and I think especially when I have read, like, sometimes if you'll just Google like self-directed learning or unschooling or something like that, or you read those articles, and they're often written more from a third party, like maybe a parenting magazine or a newspaper or something is doing like an article on unschooling. And that's the sense you get. Like, parents wait. It's always the waiting. Parents wait for their child to show interest in something, and then they gather all the resources, right? And like, that's often how it's described.
Yeah.
And that's really, I mean, often we don't wait. We are often introducing things to our kids. We don't just sit around and wait to see,
Yeah.
you know. But when they do show interest, I think if we can be patient, probably the best thing isn't to go crazy with stuff, because it really does kind of squash it. It doesn't give us a chance to figure out what it is about it that they're interested in. But I mean, we've all done it. I think we've all,
Yeah.
right? I'm not saying it's not gonna, but we get exuberant and we get all the things, and it's like, okay, this is what we're doing. But then there are also times, I think, when kids are interested in something and it takes us a while to get there. Like,
Yeah.
or maybe it's an aspect. So, for example, with nature journaling, she wanted to make her own. She wasn't really, she had a different vision for what she wanted than the books that were sold in the store. So she made her own nature journal. So she got her materials, she sewed the binding, the whole thing. And that is not so much me. I'm all about, okay, let's go grab a book and we'll go.
Right.
Right. And so I had to be a bit patient because, yeah, it wasn't necessarily the way that I would have gone about it. But then I'm like, okay, this is, and I think it was even weather related, Ashley. It might have been winter time when this first came up. And there were like these beautiful days. And I'm like, let's go today because, like, it's sunny and it's not snowing and it's all the things. And then it's like, well, no, I want to spend today, from her perspective, sewing the binding on this. So I think it was like me kind of being patient about that. And I think this happens a lot, though, in larger areas too, where we work to get on board with something our child wants to do, whether it's the interest itself or something involved in the interest. And we're like, okay, well, we need to take a breath, and we find a way to lean into it. And then the interest changes. like, and we just got there, right? Like
Yeah.
we just kind of got used to this way that they are, or this particular thing that they want to do, and then they move away from it. So I do think that it's an interesting thing to bring up because it is like we're always having to like reflect on this stuff, right? It's just it would be so nice if it was a bit easier, but these are the like little nuanced pieces that I think are tricky. But anyway, and I'm not sure if I maybe went off course there. Um,
No.
but something else I just wanted to, oh, okay. And then after creating this nature journal, nature journaling didn't really happen very many times. Like that's the whole thing, right? So
Right.
we went to the store, we bought the special paper, we did all this stuff. We did go out a couple times. It's really hard in the winter to sketch. So then,
Yeah.
but never mind, we won't take the journals with us. We'll leave them at home. We'll go, we'll take pictures, then we'll come back and do the stuff at home. So we did that, and that was fine, but it wasn't something that she continued to do. She did continue to like to go out with her binoculars and her camera, but she wasn't we weren't coming back in nature journaling. So it's that piece of like being able to let go of it and not kind of say, well, that was a bunch of time wasted. You've made this journal and we set aside this time and now you're not even doing it anymore or whatever. Because I think that those thoughts go through our head. I think I'm not the only one
No.
that those thoughts go through our head.
Yeah.
But that just isn't the way that things work when any of us develop an interest. We try a little bit. Sometimes we pull back a little bit. But the one thing I did that comes to mind to me too from this post is that when we've over time, when we've established a good level of trust with our kids,
Mm-hmm.
so probably not if your kid has just come out of school and you're both in like a deschooling process, but over time, there's room, I find, for mostly in relationships to suggest it again.
Mm-hmm.
To just say, hey, you spend a lot of time on that nature journal. The weather looks nice on Thursday. Is that something you have an interest in using? We don't have to push it,
Mm-hmm.
but I think that it's this really weird thing where it's like you don't want to push too much, but I think that there can also be this narrative that you can never ask, you can never suggest. And I think when you have a trusted relationship with your kid, I think you can, right? I think it's fine and sometimes even helpful
Yeah.
to say, hey, I just remember you were really into this. Did you want to try this day? And then be
Yeah.
okay when they say no, because they often will, or they
Yeah.
might suggest it themselves. But sometimes it's like, oh, yeah, you know. And so if you feel that might be the case, I feel like it's worth it sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. I kind of forgot about that for a little bit, actually. So I'm glad you mentioned that, Erin, that like we do hear this from other people sometimes that it's, don't ask, don't, because there's this fear of pushing too much, I guess, right? And intruding on their own ideas and thoughts or whatever. But I mean, I love it when, we've done something in the past that we haven't done in a long time, and I haven't thought of it myself. And someone, whether it's my sister or my husband or one of the kids say, oh, hey, what, do you want to pull that back out again? Or do you want to go do that again? Even if I don't have an interest, the invitation still feels good. Um, so I think, yeah, that's a really good reminder. And with what you're saying about that builded trust and that close relationship, and all the other times that we've invited or suggested or offered, and that they say no, they see our response to that as one that doesn't freak them out, really makes them feel okay to say no. I think it makes more space for us to feel okay saying, hey, like, you want to pull this out again, or do you want to go do this again? And it's just part of the relationship. It doesn't yeah, so it's like being mindful as the parent, but not being too afraid to suggest those things. I really, yeah, that was one of the things towards the end there that you had written a bit about that I thought was really, really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope so. It was definitely an interesting experience. So it was kind of fun to just kind of like reflect. about
Yeah.
her, because I have seen her, as I said, she continues to, I mean, yeah, she likes to be out with binoculars. She likes to be out with nature apps. It's not that. But I mean, she's also in a different place now where she's working a lot of hours and she has courses that she's doing. So it's not like there aren't those same opportunities as much. But I think too, like just time wise.
Yeah.
But I think too, you know, things come around.
Yeah.
Things come around as they make sense and as people have time for, you know. Like I
Yeah.
was thinking, this might be a little bit off course because it's about music rather than nature, but I think it's related. I
Mhm.
remember when we first started the podcast, and one of the first episodes, Ashley, you were and gosh, this was almost three, I think it's been 3 years. So your kids were 3 years younger
Yeah.
now, right? And I remember you saying at the time, like you felt, and I agree with you. When your kids are young, you're sort of they're still trying things out, so you're exposing them to kind of like a smorgasbord of things, of opportunities. And I was thinking about how I think it does make sense to offer different opportunities, whether they're outdoors, whether it's like just to, you know, does your child want to reflect about what they saw when they came back, either by writing about it or drawing a picture or whatever. Um, and they might not want to, but I think all of these things are, yeah, they're interesting to offer opportunities and resources around. And I was just thinking about how, like with music, and who knows, maybe if we ever do a music episode, I'll end up telling the story again. But we had a lot, my kids were exposed to a lot of music in different ways. We have a lot of people in our family who play instruments and perform in various places. And my husband and I just really like music. So we had music on a lot. Um, and they've always just had a lot of exposure to it. And we've come in and out of, like, they've each done things a bit differently, but they've come in and out of opportunities with like lessons or different things like that. And then really, you know, again, as they have gotten busier the last, I'm going to say maybe 4 or 5 years, you know, I just haven't seen the instruments come out, or you know, haven't seen those things come out as much. But just in like the last month, there's been like three different things that have made me go, oh, I am kind of glad that we, again, we didn't push, we didn't force things, but we just opened up opportunities for things, right? And so the first one was my daughter, who had my dad had taught her quite a bit of guitar and ukulele, just kind of one-offs here and there, but she had learned quite a bit, and then just hadn't. He bought her a ukulele. She used it for a little bit, and then mostly it just sits. Like it mostly just sits. There's not much that happens. And then I guess she decided to do for him for Father's Day. She was going to do a couple songs for him. And I had no idea how much. So she'd been working on, I guess, with YouTube videos. And so I thought she was just going to do a little, I don't know what. Um, but anyway, she just, not in front of everybody, it was just kind of in front of my mom and dad. She ended up playing like a fairly, like my dad was blown away. He's like, I didn't teach you these chords. How do you know all these chords, right? But she just took the base of the stuff he had taught her, and she went to YouTube, and so she sang. And so she sang an Elton John song, and then what else did she do? She did a few, 3 or 4 different ones. And my dad was like, hold on, he got his harmonica out. Like, right. He's like, you know, and it was just like none of us knew. I didn't know that she could play kind of, I didn't know she'd learned all this from YouTube, but she had just taught herself, right? And so I think like just having the ukulele.
Mhm.
I mean, I think you said this, I think one of your guys has an instrument of some, I can't remember,
Guitar.
a guitar, right? Just having these things. The other one just happened this morning, actually. Um, so somebody else got passed on an electric guitar. It sat. My daughter bought herself one, but then it's actually my son was given one from my kind of my dad via my brother-in-law, and it's just sat there. And same thing, he would have learned guitar from my dad. He actually chose to do he did a guitar course for a couple of years, I think, like in his teen years. But again, haven't seen him touch the guitar And he went away with my husband for the weekend, and there was a lot of like just jamming and musical instruments, and he really had fun. And they had different guitars, and he was just working with what he knew, which he does know a fair bit of guitar. Um, and then like first thing this morning, this electric guitar's out. I can hear him playing Stand By Me. I'm like, oh, what's going on? And it's him, and he's on the guitar. And it's just and he had such a good weekend and did a lot of singing. He did a lot of singing with these guys, I guess, this weekend, and just loved it. I'm gonna have one more. I know I'm talking a lot, but there was a third example. Another son was in a wedding. He was a groomsman, and he has done a lot of like he's composed a lot of like rapping, a lot of hip hop, and done a lot of his own beats where he does all the instruments and stuff too. I've kind of forgotten about it because he hasn't done it for like 3 or 4 years. Apparently, there was people at the wedding who have his music. He knew this. They were friends of his, and they have all his songs memorized. I'd forgotten he even used to do this, and so they like spontaneously asked him to perform. So anyway, so he was performing at the wedding. All these people like knew the words. Like it was like, and I just thought, like those are just things that all that I did was offer opportunities for stuff. And if I had pushed any of those things, they weren't going to work, right? If I had said, why aren't you practicing your such and such? It's just not, that wouldn't have, I know it works for some personalities. I'm not, but it's not the same rich experience
Mm-hmm.
of just coming out and like doing it spontaneously. Anyway, I know it's about music and not nature, but I think it's the same concept that just because our kids don't latch on to the notebook, the journal, or they don't want to go for a walk, or they don't, whatever, they've still had that exposure to the opportunities of it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I feel like I've gone way off course, but I think the
No.
concept is the right. It's like we can expose them to stuff. We just need to back up from whether that hike actually feels like a good idea to them.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
or whether they need everything in the documentary pointed out to them. Like we can just watch a documentary. We don't need to be like, okay, do you remember the such and such? Like we can do a little bit of that,
Mm-hmm.
but I think we each get to know our own kids, and it's just that kind of teachable moment thing has its limit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I love all those examples. I think they're so connected. And I think it's helpful because I think we do feel, um, I think anyway, we feel pressure sometimes as homeschool parents, or maybe just all parents, that our kids are not immersed in nature enough, or that they're not aware and knowing enough about nature. And it's so important because we want them to be, environmentalists, and we want them to be outside because of their own mental health and, lots of physical activity opportunities outside. So I think we do feel pressure to be outside. And when we feel pressure, it leads to stress. And when we're stressed, we're less open and flexible because we're worried. So but I think those are good reminders that it can look different, and there's so many different ways to do these things. And I think like what you were talking about is it's not. I keep thinking like you planted the seed. Maybe that goes well with what we're talking about today, right? But like the seed is
Great metaphor.
planted, right? We've offered those opportunities to be outside in various different ways. So it's more about, yeah, offering, doing some of these things together in ways that feel good or okay to everyone, and throughout, like not just when they're little, but finding ways to continue to do it, and being open to it looking different as they get older, and doing that in a way that isn't forcing it and isn't pushing it. Because I think, like, I remember when my kids started to resist, or that's feels like a funny word to use, but they were giving me more pushback. All of a sudden, they were like, "No, I'm not going outside for a walk," and I was like, "What do you mean?" And I was like, but it's important that we get outside. I know I need to be outside to feel good. And because of that stress and worry, and then I was putting that on them, and I had to spend time on my, thinking about that a little bit more, and recognize that wasn't going to benefit anyone. And I just had to take time to think about, okay, how can this look now? What will work now? So that we can continue to kind of plant those seeds where they can come back to it when they're ready. Like they can, like we don't kill it in them, right? Like we don't
Mhm.
push them so hard that then they push back even harder. And then they're like, oh, I hate outside or I hate nature. And all of a
Yeah.
sudden you've just created this, it made it much bigger than it had to be, which we can do that. I'm thinking, like you were talking about music. I was thinking about reading came to mind. Um, there's something else, but reading came to mind where we see that too, because we get stressed and worried and we think so desperately, oh, I want my child to be a reader and a lover of books because that is great, you know, forgetting that there's lots of different ways to be, and not everybody becomes a reader, and not everybody becomes someone who wants to spend a lot of time reading, and that's 100% okay.
Mhm.
But if we have that worry and we push our kids, those are the kids who end up pushing back and saying, I don't like books. And I
Mhm.
remember working with kids with their reading for years. And I remember thinking, I know one thing to be true is that people like stories. So if we can just keep our kids, not keep, we don't need to keep our kids interested in stories. We're just naturally interested in stories. We just
Mhm.
have to be careful that we don't push them to read so much that it becomes something that they're like, I'm not great at this. I don't like it. Get it away from me. We want
Right.
to support them and help them with their literacy skills in a way that they can develop that as a tool that they have. And then they'll like books as much as they like books, whether that's a lot or just a little. But we want to avoid them hating. That's such a hard word, right? But like we want to avoid them having these negative feelings and emotions towards things like reading and being outside and music, because we know with all those things that they can benefit from it. And then the
Mhm.
last thing I'll say, while you were talking, it was just really making me think about how as adults and parents we can be quick to kind of judge kids in all ways, right? Like, oh, they don't like being outside anymore. Oh, they don't like playing soccer anymore. Oh, they don't play with their Lego anymore. Like we're so quick to,
Mhm.
or like you were talking about, like the guitar that sits there. Oh, they don't play it. And my husband and I actually talk about this. Sometimes it gets brought up because he's very much a minimalist, whereas
Mhm.
I am not. I wouldn't say I'm completely the other the other extreme where I keep everything, although he would say that I do. But as the kids get older, you kind of, eventually you start to get rid of some of the things. Like the preschool puzzles, for example, are usually safe to get rid of once the kids are, I don't know, 8, let's say. But instruments or Lego or even Pokemon cards in our house, or yeah, like there's just different things where my husband might say, oh, they haven't touched that in months or even years sometimes. But I'm like, well, we're not getting rid of it because when they're 15, they could get back into Lego. Probably safe. I mean, I know some adults who like Lego, right? Is my point. Same with musical instruments. I think that'd be another really great example. And I think as adults, we can just be quick. And I'm not sure there's reasons for it as to why we do that, but I think it's just another example or another way that we can stay open to leaving these opportunities for our kids and recognizing that, hey, they may never pick up that guitar again, or they might not be someone who spends a lot of time outside. Or I think about your daughter, like, um, who knows? Like you said, she's busy with work right now, but maybe in her 40s, she'll be like, nature journaling. I dabbled in that a bit and get back into it. So yeah, just that openness, I think, around the different possibilities and not worrying too much if they don't like stick with something or stay committed or complete something, because I think that's where a lot of that can come from, but just staying open.
Yeah, because there's so many things. How could you do everything? How could you,
Yeah.
how can you, that's the thing. How can you do everything? And I think just kind of before we sign off, something came to mind that we haven't mentioned, and it popped into my mind a bit when we were talking about curriculum, and I forgot to mention it, but like I want to put a link to Anne from Oh By the By on Instagram, and I think it's Eclectic Kids that she has online, and she chatted with us about science, right? I think about
Mhm.
science, and so much of what I mean, I think about the resources she's put together, and they are so open ended
Yeah.
and those are the types of things that I think, um, again, not all kids want a resource, but sometimes it gets us thinking.
Yeah.
And for some kids, they love that, to have something that can be printed off and put into something, but is still open-ended enough. It's like a springboard kind of, rather than to tell you what to do. So I want to make sure we put her link in there. But I got thinking too about just how we were talking about how, like, the value of nature is not just the science or the art or the whatever, but sometimes even just, um, Anne we talked a lot in that episode about, like, citizen science
Mm-hmm.
and the idea of just getting involved in different things. And I think about some of the things that I see pop up, like just photography submissions that, like, I know, I can't remember if it's Canadian, there's a Canada one right now anyway, but it's like, taking pictures and submitting them over a certain number of days, or like those bird counts.
Mm-hmm.
There's all kinds of stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
that is just something and here's, I think, the distinction. If it's something that we find interesting, we can actually do it.
Yeah.
And we don't have to say, okay, have you given me your 10 birds that you noticed or whatever? It's just like, we can just do it.
Yeah.
And because those things are interesting for any age, really. And they're valuable. We don't
Mm-hmm.
just need to give kids, if things are of value, then they're of value to be done anyway. And so we can contribute to that, or we can do that. And I think we can be narrating, not like obsessively, but we can just narrate our own thoughts and the things that we notice. So for my family, they are often saying, Mom, look, I knew you'd want to see this. Or they'll send me a picture of something that ran out onto the golf course, or they'll, like, they're sending me things because it's an interest of mine. And then in some way they kind of become interested in it. But it's just, yeah, if things are interesting to us, they can just stay that way. And
Yeah.
our kids will often pick up on that, even if it doesn't become their interest. They're eager to share it because they know it's something we like.
Yeah.
So I think I think this conversation, I mean, even in our conversation, a certain amount of it is about, like, how do we present this to our kids? And I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, really, we just come back to, like, we're just living and sharing our own interest.
Mm-hmm.
And that just helps us take the pressure off anybody, right? Like, so much of the time, that's what we can be doing.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Love it.
it's good. Okay, so we'll link those. I would really encourage people to take a look at this post of Haley's. I mean, mine is
Yeah.
more a story. It's nice. But Haley has put an enormous number of resources. And I find that, even when you go to a resource, it will often link you to another one, and you can get down a pretty good rabbit trail of stuff. So,
Yeah, but I do want to add that I think I love Haley's, a great spot to go for resources. But I think yours blog post for anybody, especially thinking about this type of stuff like nature exploration and study with older kids, because I know that was
oh
on
yeah,
my mind a bit, quite a
okay.
bit too. And like you said, your daughter was 15
Mm-hmm.
when this experience that you wrote about. So I think that's nice, because when I looked up nature stuff just quickly before we were talking today to see what might come up, it's a lot of the younger years, like a lot. I don't know if I
Okay,
came
okay.
across, yeah, I don't know if I came across, I'm not saying it's not out there. And I was just looking online pretty quickly, but I didn't come, oh, I maybe came across one other thing that started to talk a little bit about the middle years, but there wasn't much. So,
So that's actually super interesting. So I'll just take another minute because I hadn't thought about that. And what's interesting to me about that is it tells me that it's like people trying to make sure they're doing enough, right? But I think some of the probably the most interesting opportunities actually happen sometimes as kids get, if we're talking about actual, like, diving in,
yeah,
because there are those, they can actually be part of things like some of those maybe older volunteer opportunities, or maybe things that are just a little bit more in depth, or require them to get there on their own, or all those kinds of things. And it just makes me think about how just yesterday I got video footage from one of my guys who he and his friend just got their boating license and he's teaching a friend to fish, right? And so, like, getting footage of fish that I don't recognize, and like I wasn't even thinking about this conversation, right? So like, oh, that's cool. What kind of fish is that? And so just taking the pressure off ourselves that we have to be the giver of all the information, because we just don't. We will never know as much about our kids' interests as they will end up figuring out on their own. There's
Mm-hmm.
there's no way to do that. So
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't even thought about that. But yeah, I think it's kind of an exciting thing to talk about it as kids get older, because they really have the independence at that point to really be able to go and do what
Yeah.
they're actually interested in, which is what they'll learn.
Yeah. Yeah. They'll get the
So
most out of those experiences
yeah,
for sure.
so okay, all right,
Awesome.
be a good place to wind up then. Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you, Erin.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
And this ends our conversation today. We hope you found it interesting and maybe helpful. If you'd like to connect further or see additional content, Haley can be found on the web and on Instagram at Taking a Kinder Path. I, Erin, can be found at Everlearning, and Ashley can be found on Instagram at Ashley as Mama and Storytime Shelves. We'd be very grateful if you'd share this conversation with anyone you think might appreciate it. Thank you for your time today.